Hey guys, so I've decided to have a little bit of a different setup today. So I'm stood up, I'm usually sat on the floor and it's really uncomfortable, but I'm going to see how this goes. So I'm going to do my September reading wrap up. I'm a little bit late doing this because I've had this really awful cold, so if I sound quite nasally or my throat gives up halfway through, that's why. I'm sorry about the reflection as well off of my glasses, it's really irritating, but I can't do anything about it because it's very dark, because it's winter. So yes, I basically only read 3 books in October, but they were really good. They're ones that I'm really glad I've read. I've wanted to read for a while and I'm going to get cracking because otherwise this is going to be way too long. This is Searcy, it's by Madeline Miller and it's a retelling of Searcy's story. I've got it angled like this so it doesn't catch the glare from the light, but basically it was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. I really want to read as many of the books off of that list as possible. I've read My Sister, The Serial Killer, and I'm going to read An American Marriage as well. But I studied Latin when I was at school. I did an A-level in it, and when I went to uni I had to read the Aeneid, I had to read the Iliad, and I had to read the Odyssey as part of like a kind of like Greek and Latin rooting into English literature, which is what I studied. So I was really excited to kind of see a different interpretation of these stories that I've come to know really quite well. So it basically, oh, there we go. It starts off and it gives a really big backstory of Searcy and how she, if you know the story of Odysseus, she's the woman living on an island who turns all of Odysseus's men into pigs and kind of like tries to keep him there for as long as possible. You basically go through Cersei's whole life and it's a very long book. It was actually a lot longer than I was expecting, but it kind of weaves lots of different stories into this and tells them from a woman's perspective. So you've got Daedalus and Icarus, you've obviously got Odysseus, you've got his return to Crete, is it? I can't remember where you've got his return to his homeland. You've got the story of the Minotaur being born, obviously Scylla being created, and oh, there we go. Yeah, it's all told from a woman's perspective. I've given this 4 stars out of 5 just because I was kind of waiting for something really dramatic to happen and it never did. And there were times when I felt like the narrative really slowed down and I wanted it to pick up the pace. But it was a really interesting read and I'm glad I read it, and I want to read all of Madeline Miller's other books now, so it was definitely well worth it. It was just those little snags that lost it that 5th star. Next I read The Woman in Black by Susan Hill, which I was actually really lucky. A friend of mine had a spare ticket to go and see it in the theatre last month and I did not sleep very well that night. It was so scary. I was very freaked out, but if you haven't heard of it, it was made into a film with Daniel Radcliffe and it's a very popular theatre show, but obviously originated as a book. It's all about a man called Arthur Kipps. It's all about a man called Arthur Kipps whose grandchildren are trying to get him to tell some kind of ghost story and he really doesn't want to, and in the end he caves and tells the story of when he was a young lawyer and he had to go and sort out the affairs of a woman that had recently died. She was quite old and he goes to her house, which is kind of in the middle of a big marsh, and all these scary things start happening. It was a really good read for like September time, getting into autumn. It's all these kind of like ghostly things that happen and it gets into it being scary quite quickly, and I think Susan Hill is very good at making things very vivid. So I could just, there's scenes from the book that I've imagined that I can still think of. It was that kind of level of just being very accurate. It wasn't very wordy. If you want to read a classic, this would be like a nice, interesting, quick one to go for. And I've given it 4 stars just because there was, again, that little bit kind of missing for me. There were a few bits that I found that I kind of got less interested in, and I don't know, yeah, it just didn't complete me. And my last read of the month was something that I really loved and that I think I'm going to talk about in more detail in another video, and it's Body Positive Power by Jayne Crabbe. I've followed Megan on Instagram for a few years now. She's at Body Posi Panda. If you don't follow her, I'd really recommend checking her out. I was quite reluctant to read this one because any books that I've read about eating disorders or anything like that have brought back my own kind of... I didn't struggle with an eating disorder, but I've struggled with disordered eating. And it really kind of didn't make me feel very good, so I was very worried that this book would be like that. And if you've ever read some kind of, I don't know, lots of self-help or things around that, or even any kind of fiction, it can be quite triggering. So that's why I kind of kept off reading it until I felt I was in a really stable place. But I would say that I really did not need to, because she does this so well. Megan basically talks through what diet culture is and how it's kind of integrated itself into our society and how it's really damaging a lot of people. She talks about how the kind of like body goals are very ableist, and they can be quite racist, and obviously they're very fat phobic, and how like this body goal that's kind of paraded around just is not attainable. Like, most people cannot get there. But yeah, it was a really interesting read. I kind of expected it to be like an Instagrammer book where it's not really well researched and she doesn't really actually tell you much, but it was so well researched, it was so thorough. And yeah, if you read anything that I ever recommend, it should be this, because it's so important, I feel. And yeah, that was it. Thank you for watching. That's my probably quite long September reading wrap up, and I hope you enjoyed it. Bye!